Hi there, boys and girls. Here is our animal adaptations lesson for today. So we've been talking about animals all last week, and we started off by first classifying them into two different groups, right? You either had animals with a backbone, which we call vertebrates, or you had animals without a backbone, which we called the invertebrates, right? And so now that we know we have two classes or two groups of animals, let's take an even deeper look at how animals adapt to their environment. So today we're going to be talking about adaptations. Now, what are adaptations? An adaptation is basically how an animal's body and behavior helps it survive in whatever environment it lives in. So if it lives in the ocean, if it lives in the Arctic, or if it lives in the desert or the rainforest, its body and behavior has to adapt or change to help it survive where it lives. Okay? Have you ever wondered that? How do camels live in the desert? I've always wondered that. How are fish able to breathe underwater? Those are all adaptations to help them survive. Okay? And we're going to look at three different ways in which an animal uses its adaptations to survive. The first one is how animals behave. How do animals behave, or how do they act in order to adapt to their surroundings so that they can survive? Well, some of their behavior is called behavioral adaptation. They do something that helps them survive. Okay, so what are some of those things that animals do? Well, if you already listened to Charlotte's Web chapter 5, some of those behaviors are instinct. They are just born with them. That's what an instinct behavior is. So Charlotte, who is the spider in Charlotte's Web, she is born with the ability to spin a web, right? And she needs that web to catch what? Her food, right? She needs that to catch food. That's how she survives. You can't survive without food, guys. Not even people can do that, right? So she just automatically, no one taught her. She was just born and she knew how to spin a web. All right? That's what we call instinct. And that is a behavior, a behavioral adaptation. Another type of behavioral adaptation is something that is a learned behavior. These are behaviors that have been taught to you. So, for example, this bear is teaching its cub, its baby, how to hunt and catch fish, or maybe hunt for an animal, or find different types of plants to eat. Do you remember when I read Stella Luna? Right? Stella Luna had fallen into the bird's nest, right? And so the mother bird basically taught her babies how to fly. That is a learned behavior. Your mom and dad helped you to learn how to walk on your 2 feet, right? You didn't come out into this world starting to walk. You probably crawled or you were held by your mom and dad, and then you learned how to walk. Those are learned behaviors. So animals behave like this to adapt to their environment, okay, so that they can survive. Sometimes the adaptation comes in the form of what they look like. So what do animals look like? How do they adapt to the change, or how do they adapt the way that they look in order to survive? Okay, we call these physical adaptations, guys. So a physical adaptation is basically how an animal looks like in order to survive. Have you ever seen an Arctic fox or a polar bear, right? Remember back in our animal adaptations book, we had the giant polar bear in animal disguises, right there, right? That is a physical adaptation. All of these are physical adaptations, but there is one in which his fur color has changed white in order to blend with its surroundings. Again, it's a type of adaptation that helps that polar bear catch food. So one of the types of ways, their physical adaptations, is camouflage, right? So the camouflage is a way for an animal's color to change to help it blend with its environment. Remember the walking stick video, right? The walking stick camouflaged with the trees and the twigs that it was living in. It changed its color to look like the stick, or I'm sorry, to look like the tree. This sandhill is not a sandhill, it's a horned lizard, but its color helps it blend with the sand of the desert. So camouflage is one of those ways where they change the way they look like in order to adapt to their environment. And here's one of my favorite words. This one is called mimicry. And I guess the walking stick is more like mimicry, because mimicry is an animal that looks like something else in the environment. Okay, that looks like something else in the environment. When you watch your Brain Pop video today, you're going to see a butterfly in that video that looks kind of like a leaf, right? So a leaf is part of the environment, and the butterfly has mimicked the leaf so that it can look like it. Just as the walking stick mimics the tree so that it looks just like the tree and won't get eaten. It's a way to help them survive or adapt. And finally, how does an animal adapt to its weather in order to help it survive? Well, there are a couple ways. When the weather gets cold, we might have heard this word before. Hibernation, right? So bears are one of those animals that hibernates, right? And it goes into this really, really long, deep sleep in the wintertime. It doesn't wake up during the wintertime. And that's because it needs to store its energy, right? There's no food to get during the wintertime for the bear, so it hibernates in order to survive. Whereas sometimes when it gets too cold, some animals will migrate. This word is migration, and migration is just a long journey that animals make when the seasons change. So in the sky, sometimes during the fall or during the winter, you'll see animals like flying, some birds that are flying in the air, and they look like they're in the pattern of a V, right? They are migrating to someplace where it is warmer, because when it's warmer, you can survive for a longer period of time, right? So these are ways in which animals have figured out over thousands and thousands of years how to survive out in the wild. They have adapted their behaviors, they've adapted their look, and they've adapted to the weather in order to survive. All right, boys and girls, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you with these definitions, and you are going to write them in your writing journal. Let me get my writing journal out. So I want you to turn, we can't really do it on our animal vocabulary page, but I want you to turn to the next blank page in your writer's journal, and you are going to write the definitions for all of these animal adaptation words in your journal. Like I said, I am going to write it down here in mine. I'll take a picture and I'll load it to the today's lessons today so that you can see it and copy it in your own writing journal. Okay, you guys? Make sure you watch that video on Brain Pop Jr. all about camouflage. It's one of those ways, right, in which an animal uses its look to help it survive in the wild. I hope you liked that lesson. I know I did. There's a lot of things that animals have done to adapt to their environment. And if you are ready to, you can probably work on the adaptation slide in your animal research report. But if you're not ready, then don't worry about it. We'll talk more about that tomorrow.